Hello, welcome to this controller session with not the controller, of course, the editor of BBC4, Cassian Harrison. It's a meaningless title, doesn't matter what it's called, does it? So you're in charge. You're in charge of BBC4.
Yeah, I think so.
That's the main thing.
Yeah.
One of my favourite channels, I'm sure all of you, one of your favourite channels, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to give him a hard time about train spotting and stuff like that. Why did you pick those particular 4 shows? How do they define the channel? Why are they your favourites?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think they're really interesting. They were very brief clips, and do go and try and watch more of them if you can. I think they're all really interesting. I think each of them talks to a different bit of what BBC4 is. I think the James May Reassembler series is, I must confess, somewhat embarrassingly cooked up in a pub with Mr. May, which is a great way to come up with an idea. Which is basically James wanted to take ordinary household objects and rebuild them. And in that manner, which I'm sure we'll come to, of things like slow TV and all the rest of it, there's a thing about BBC4 which it absolutely loves detail, and it absolutely loves taking the time to unpack that in a way that I don't think any other television channel, any other television brand really feels that it has the opportunity to do. And it proved incredibly popular with audiences. They absolutely loved it. And its sense of pleasure and fun and wit and yet expertise, I think, is very much part of what BBC4 is about. Lucy Worsley on the Romanovs, another part of what the BBC4 vocabulary is completely about is big subjects, big timeless subjects in arts, in culture and history, and exploring those with a depth and detail that you wouldn't find anywhere else. The Train Spotting Live was about event. I think any television channel in the modern landscape, you want to find those moments in the schedule which really stand out, which really have impact, which feel like a real treat and a real piece of fun. But again, it had that part of that BBC DNA which absolutely talked to detail, it talked to passion, and it engaged with an audience in a way which was incredibly strong and visceral. And I've now been talking so much, I've forgotten what the third one was.
What was the third one?
What was the third one?
Trapped.
Scandinavian drama. Need I say no more anymore? Absolutely. A kind of elemental part of the BBC4 story and its vocabulary is just those brilliant Saturday night dramas. It's that thing that the channel, I feel, has a really strong, really powerful story. A story that's actually been built up, before I took on the reins of the channel with previous controllers. Friday night with music, Saturday night with a foreign language drama. That place of feeling like a real destination for something special and unique that you wouldn't get anywhere else.
So is that key? You've kind of picked out that these are kind of little, almost like clubs of people. You mentioned that, I think, that idea last year, that the BBC viewer it almost feels like this channel itself is like a club where we all know kind of what we're going to get and we can go to it and find those things we like.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you never want to do is you don't want to be something where people just know what they want to get. You want to be able to be offering them something that is surprising, that's unique, but nevertheless they need to feel that they need to have a really strong sense of what the tone and what the approach of the channel is. And what I really like about BBC4 is when we do audience research is that we're the channel that people come to when they feel like they've kind of gorged on the McDonald's of the mainstream channels, and not to do down my illustrious colleagues in the terrestrial area of the portfolio. But absolutely, we're a place where people come when they feel, God, well, I've just, actually what I want is something really refreshing, really surprising, really pleasurable and really different. And what's terrific is that the audience numbers are reflecting that. We're going up in terms of ratings. We're the highest AI of all of the BBC portfolio. We're the highest fresh and new of the BBC portfolio. So I think we're doing something good.
Obviously, you're targeting people like train spotters and history buffs. Are there other groups of people you think about targeting, going, right, we've got to come up with programmes for these certain groups of people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's any kind of passionate club of a kind of certain size. I mean, I think it's drawing a lesson from the landscape of the internet. So often in Edinburgh or these kind of television conventions and get-together, everyone just sits and gets tremendously angsty about the rise of social media and Facebook, etc., etc. But actually, I think that what they show and what is a real opportunity is that people love to come together around a common and shared subject, and you can do that in the context of social media. But actually, television is a fantastic convener of those passions. And that happens on the mainstream channels. It happens with extraordinary scale with things like Bake Off and similarly. But that doesn't mean that isn't something that I don't think television in in general shouldn't be doing, and it isn't something that BBC4 can't do. And isolating those clubs and those communities, I think, is a fantastic and really enjoyable thing. And, you know, we've done it around Train Spotters, slightly tongue-in-cheek, but we've also done it around craft. You know, there's millions of people in this country who love making things. And what the James May talks to, and we did another brilliant show just about people making stuff up and down the country, which again went mental on social media, is that people love to have those lodestones to converge around.
But is there a particular kind of BBC4 way of dealing with those particular clubs you're talking about in those groups? Do you know what I mean? Like, so is there a particular way you would say you're looking for producers to come up with an approach to putting those subjects on TV on your channel?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a question about are there ways that we can empower audiences in interesting and different ways. So another thing that we've done over the course of the year, that we've been doing through the year, is a great big music season called My Generation, which we've been running specific weekends starting in the spring, and I kind of built it with BBC Two and with Radio 2 and Radio 6 as kind of grand weekends of celebration of decades of popular music. But the heart of what the BBC4 offer is in that is a series called The People's History of Pop, which is, I think, the first crowdsourced documentary series. So what we did was we actually went out, Steve Condy and Seven Wonder, the production company, set up a website, and basically we used local radio, we used national radio to invite people to submit their memorabilia, their memories of the story of popular music, what was there, what inspired them, you know, their ticket stubs, their t-shirts, all the rest of it. And we got thousands of items submitted, and then we've used those to then build the documentary series about. And I think those kind of things are absolutely of how we can talk and engage with and work with the audience in a much more direct way is really exciting.
Let's talk about the clip you had of the James May Reassembler show, which I loved, you know, watching James May assembling an electric guitar. And that's kind of part of the slow TV trend that you've pioneered, isn't it, in a way that, I mean, you know, you have all kinds of elements to that slow TV, but it was definitely, it wasn't a fast-paced approach to watching him assembling stuff. And rumour has it you wanted the edit to be slower, in fact, you slowed it down.
To be fair, it wasn't actually me that did, but it came through and looked at it, and a brilliant commissioning team, so it's Tom McDonald and Lucinda Axelson were working with Plum on it. And I do think it's I think one of the fun parts of the job is kind of actually just come up with a top line idea or agree something and let people enjoy it and do what they want to do with it. So they all went off and worked it up and filmed it and everything. I did have the great privilege of getting to get my son along to meet James May. That was the only reason I really commissioned it. No, that's not true. But no, they'd all looked at it, and then they came back and said, right, this is the edit and all the rest of it. And then it transpired afterwards that they had a huge amount of dialogue about how much stuff there was going to be in it and how quick it was and all the rest of it. And I think the original cut had a really pacey pre-title on it and the kind of classic grammar of any television grammar. They just took it off. And they just let it be James very methodically rebuilding his electric guitar, etc., etc., etc. And I do think that you're right. I mean, it's part of that slow thing. We also had a brilliant series which we've returned to as a brand, won an RTS award, called Handmade, which we launched originally with the first slow season, which was just 3 half-hour programs, the opposite of Reassembler, in fact, people just making things. So an amazing half-hour film done by the Scotland Arts team, of somebody just blowing a glass jug. And that thing of kind of decelerating, of just concentrating on something with real detail and real conviction, again, audiences have really responded to. And I do think is a real kind of mark of differentiation in the television landscape. And I don't think that it means that there's less content in there. It just means that you're approaching the content in a different way.
How far can it go, though? You know, I mean, we've seen Ron Seal ads did an ad of effectively paint drying, which is totally ripped off from slow TV on News 4. Would you have, you know, paint drying or a fireplace?
No.
Where are you going to go with the slow TV?
Well, there's got to be a reason for it and a purpose to it. I mean, we've got a brilliant new one coming up for Bank Holiday weekend, which is All Aboard the Country Bus, which is a 2-hour slow TV journey through the Yorkshire Dales. but it is the most, by all repute, and it certainly looks amazing, the most beautiful bus ride in Britain. But also, as we've always done with the slow things, is that it's not just, that we're just going to show you something. There's always bits of information. We always choose, when we did the canal trip, again, it was an extraordinary journey that canal trip took you on. And we had captions and bits of archive and elements that just, at certain moments, just opened out what it was you were looking at, gave you context, gave you history, gave you information. So it's not a gimmick. It is a genuine mode of television that I think people really respond to. And you can overdo it. We don't do it all the time, but it's a nice treat. And again, I think that's what's really important in running any channel, be it a BBC One or a BBC Four or an ITV or whichever, is that you really want to give the audience treats. You want to give them something special to come to.
Well, one treat, there was Trainspotting Live. Let's talk about Trainspotting Live. Must have been a lovely idea, but obviously it did run into some trouble. It must have been the only time possibly the BBC Four made it to the front page of The Sun.
It's my moment of
absolute
victory.
triumph.
Absolutely, a real moment of triumph. I couldn't quite believe that.
No.
I mean, it managed the front page of The Sun on the day that David Cameron, what was it? There was David Cameron finally left Downing Street.
Right, okay.
This is what they decided. The Sun decided to run on its front page, which actually I think is a very justifiable news decision.
Absolutely,
yeah,
everyone was resigning there.
Yeah, exactly.
We're over it. But so, what happened there? Why did you end up showing old footage of trains? And
it's shocking. Well, it's just Peter Stoke got rather overexcited.
Okay, as he does.
As he does, really. I mean, for all of it being a three-part series, you think, Trainspotting, well, that's all a bit silly. Actually, it was a logistical and organisational tour de force. It was 3 nights of live television from Didcot. We had multiple camera crews all around the country trying to capture the best of particular models of trains. And it was 10 minutes into the first show, and Peter basically just mistook a piece of archive for something that he thought was a live clip coming in. But I think there's a meta story underneath that, or a kind of bigger story, which is, why did they run? Why did The Sun decide to put that on the front page on the day that David Cameron resigns? And I think that it's about the fact that actually, doing a 3-part series, Trainspotting Live, kind of feels like it might be frivolous, but there is actually something about it and something about that subject which does resonate at a very deep level, that there's something about our collective shared culture which we might feel a bit tongue-in-cheek about and we might titter about, but actually it is something about who we are as a nation that we do quite enjoy, and we like being train spotters. We like knowing the detail about something in really obsessional detail. We are secretly quite perversely proud of it. And I think in a world, because it was that moment when politics was completely melting down, I think The Sun's decision was really, oh God, our readers can't take any more hardcore news Brexit meltdown, and actually let's just give them something really nice and reassuring that talks to the kind of the national soul in a way that all this Brexit stuff seems to have been kind of tearing apart. Absolutely. I might be over-reading into it, but I still think there's something in there.
I love that, yeah. I mean, it does feel like train spotters and, kind of history. It feels a bit male and nerdy. Now, I am total, obviously, male and definitely a nerd, so I love it. But is that an issue for you? Do you think you have to kind of go beyond that?
You look at the numbers of the channel per se, and it's absolutely on the nose of being 50-50 male and female. Even the Trainspotting Live, actually, as far as I remember, wasn't particularly male skewing. I think that these kind of moments do kind of combine people in their front room. I suspect possibly husbands of the household may have gone, I really want to watch that. But on the other hand, as I say, we did do a brilliant live film, or not live, but kind of almost as live process film about Craft, that was completely female dominated, actually. I don't think there's a particular... Passionate clubs aren't necessarily Boise. I think men, women, old and young are always engaged with that. I mean, history buffs or whichever, and we may come on to talk about it. We're rebooting this brilliant game show called Time Commanders, which is basically wargaming. And I ended up on my holidays sharing a house, and there was a 15-year-old boy there who was sitting playing war games, and I told him we were doing this. He's like, that sounds absolutely brilliant, so clubs land in every part of the landscape.
We've got a big topic to talk about now, but and the question comes from our highly innovative and exciting video wall. Let's have a look.
My lord, I'm so terrified of this.
Cassian, what would a truly diverse BBC4 look like, and how would it be different from where the channel is now?
Ooh, good question. I think that I think the BBC, I think the industry And I think I myself, all of us, feel that this is more than a pressing question. I think that we've been doing a good job in terms of diversity, but we haven't been doing a good enough job. I'm really proud we've been doing a few films which, what I've really wanted to do is bring disability to the fore. So we did a brilliant documentary which just early in the summer called Life or Death, which
we're going to get to in a minute. So
okay, so I won't talk about that one too much. Okay, I'll hold off on that one. We've got Alison Lapper presenting a film for us, the amazing disabled artist. I just simply would like to find more voices like that, and I think that I think it's true in that context. I think again we've been working very hard. Music is a really important part of the BBC4 story, but what we've been able to do, and I'm really pleased about, is there has been a kind of fairly kind of constant point of view of BBC4's music programming, which is a bit kind of Nick Hornby. And what I'm really pleased about is we've been able to move to commission. We've got a brilliant film on hip hop with Rodney P, amazing hip hop artist presenting. We've got a film on roots reggae with Akala presenting it, of just broadening out the voices there. But I think that the challenge for me and the opportunity is that simply a truly diverse BBC4 should have more diverse faces on it. It should be more mixed racially, it should have more disability. The thing for me is finding those right voices, which is that the other thing that BBC4 absolutely rests on is expertise. And I don't want to compromise that, so what I really want to do is find a way to bring that kind of talent with that kind of expertise together. So that's the goal. And if anyone wants to, that is a brief. Bring me people that are, diverse but expert, have interesting things to say. And I think the thing about BBC4 is a great BBC4 presenter isn't actually somebody who really wants to be a television presenter first and foremost. They're somebody that is interested in ideas and has their own, mental passions and ambitions. And then being on TV is kind of secondary to that. So that's a kind of, that's the challenge with that one.
Right. Oh, that's good to know. Yeah. Let's talk about Life and Death then. This you picked this out as we're calling it best taste, so an example of something that really worked for you. Let's have a look.
Okay.
What if you like, particularly can people hear, if people are producers looking to make shows, what can they learn from that as being an example?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think what's clear about it is what it is a documentary sequence, but what it is it's entirely in British Sign Language. And all of the dialogue is subtitled. And there's just a thing that what that is it's a world which we, or those of us who aren't deaf and can't sign or whichever, just know nothing of. And what I really enjoyed about it was being taken into a world which I didn't know and I didn't see, but also the way that, the inevitable point about not having speech, there was no dialogue, it was entirely in subtitles, meant that you were kind of skewing what the televisual experience was. It's completely different. You've taken something away. And it was only kind of retrospectively that I was thinking about it that I realised that there's a kind of commonality that actually runs from slow TV to that, which is that I seem to be really interested in what happens when you've got the kind of standard grammar and vocabulary and tools of television, which we all know and we're all really fluent with, etc., etc. But what I think becomes really interesting is when you take bits of that away. So slow TV, it's about what happens when you take editing away. That's about what happens when you take speech and sound away. And what I think happens when you do that is that you end up, by virtue of, as it were, taking away one sense, you end up concentrating more on what the other senses can give you. And I think what it does is it kind of twists and enlivens and gives you a kind of really fresh perspective on subjects. So if there's a kind of underlying principle behind what that is about, it's about thinking about, forgive my rude language, how can we fuck with form? As well as the subject areas of television, we all know, I think, very well what people feel passionately about with. But actually, how can we distort and change and modify and delimit form in order to push ourselves into new territories.
So taking that then, if you're going to encourage people to fuck with form,
Yeah.
are there particular areas in your schedule or seasons or just the kind of show you want them to fuck the form with? Any subject matters
sure.
you're looking for, do you need more of in that way?
Completely. Well, look, let's not make it the mantra of this session, but frankly, really interesting fucks with form, in whatever form that they might be, I'm always interested in. But, the vocabulary of the channel is grouped around, some particular lodestones, as it were. Arts. I'm always interested in not merely the history of art and culture, but actually creating things. So we did a brilliant thing last year live from Television Centre, where what we did was we got 4 regional theatre companies to create devised shows and made a gala event out of that, which we broadcast live on BBC4 on a Sunday night, which was completely unlike anything I think that you'd ever see. We had fantastic artists with Tourette's doing a kind of live entertainment show and dance piece. It was brilliant. So that kind of sits in the arts territory. In science, again, I'm kind of really interested in experiments that we can do. So we've got a slightly deconstructive thing coming up with the autumn, where it's the 70th anniversary of the first night of television. So we decided to recreate the first night of television, rebuilding the original cameras that we used in 1947, which leads you into really interesting territory. Documentary, I think just generally, I think that our audience, and this goes from documentary that we do out into Storyville, just different perspectives and ways of looking at the world. There's another Storyville, which I talked about at the Hay Festival, which is in this mode, called Notes on Blindness, which is this extraordinary film based on the tapes of a guy that he recorded as he was going blind. And what he did was he also recorded the activity in his house. And what the filmmakers done this amazing thing. Well, what they've done is they've taken the tapes, used those as a voiceover, but then the actuality that he recorded with the tapes, they post-synced drama reconstruction, as it were, of what was happening. And you end up with this, it's just an absolutely amazing odyssey into a kind of new world of human experience, which I just find fantastically stimulating.
Yeah, that was an absolutely brilliant film.
I know. And there are the genres, which the channel concentrates on. It is arts, it's music, it's science, it's history, but that doesn't mean that I'm not open to turning over not insignificant chunks of the schedule to do something quite radical. I mean, the one other thing which I am not unnervous about, to be honest with you, is that I have decided to turn over the entire channel to Keith Richards for a weekend.
Wow.
At some point in the autumn, and I don't quite know what's going to happen.
Is that just so you can have lunch with Keith Richards and get
that was a significant part of it, obviously. He's an extraordinary figure. He's been a cultural icon of this country and indeed of the world for 50 years. I don't know if you've ever read his autobiography, but it's an extraordinary account. I mean, he comes across, the classic Keith shtick is, a bottle of Jack Daniels and flat on his back, but he's an unbelievably intelligent man, and has an unbelievably wide-ranging cultural appetite, which informs what he does. And and I did end up, sitting down and chatting with him. And what I can say is that there will be more French Nouvelle Vague films in Keith's weekend than you might imagine.
Oh, excellent. Good to know.
Indeed.
Good segue, because we're going to look at another key area of the BBC4 output in a sec with another question for the video wall. But let me just remind you, if you do want to ask a question, please God, send it to the app, and I will see it here on this other iPad, and I will ask it towards the end. But let's take this question from the video wall. Sure.
Cassian, BBC4 clearly suffers from a lack of money and often pleads poverty with shows it wants to commission. Now that other broadcasters are buying up foreign language dramas, aren't you worried that BBC4 is now going to be priced out of that market?
That's just Jamie, who always wants more money. It's an interesting question. BBC4 and actually, the BBC's acquisitions team, who really are the people at the heart of our Saturday nights, Sue Deeks and Simon Sugar, have done an extraordinary job over the course of the last 10 years building that Saturday night brand. There's no doubt that other people have looked at what we do and decided that they'd like to copy it.
Who can you be
quite
talking
blatantly.
about?
Who could I be imagining? Yeah. Walter, whoever you are. But I think what's really interesting is there are two things out of this one, which is that for all of the song and dance about Walter and all of his billboards and all the rest of it.
This is Channel 4's Walter, in case people don't know,
okay,
Walter Presents, Channel 4's foreign drama and just all kind of foreign dramas and the whole kind of area of their output that is entirely curated by one guy.
Indeed.
Who gathers it all from around the world.
Basically, they're moving into the foreign language drama market, as it were. But whatever brings more content to the British audience has always got to be a good thing. But in the end, you look at what Walter Presents has, and I think they've made the fundamental mistake, which is that basically, if it's got subtitles on it, it's worth showing. There's not a lot that I find on Walter Presents that I think is particularly good, and the thing that Sue and Simon do is that they just have a brilliant eye. I mean, the point is that it's not about the subtitles, it's about the story, and they have a brilliant eye for a brilliant story well told. So that's point one, and I just think I feel incredibly privileged just by their ability to spot those pieces that are fantastic. And then I think the second thing is that by virtue of us being the people that built that brand in the UK, we do have a brilliant relationship with the people making those series. And what we are willing to do, and actually what we have to do, and I'm really happy to do, is that we, more often than not nowadays, what we'll end up doing is going quite early on projects. So even at a script stage, even at a treatment stage, because actually the value of what the BBC means and what BBC4 means that if we're in there, that really helps those people raise the other co-pro that they want in order to make their series. So obviously, in terms of the overall landscape, it is competitive. It's increasingly competitive, but I'm really grateful that I think we're still managing to hold to that real premium brand value that we've had.
And does it still do well in that Saturday night slot? Those shows,
yeah, absolutely. And we've had at least two absolute stonkers this year. I mean, there was Trapped, which is the first Icelandic drama, which is absolutely brilliant, and The Disappearance. And those were, I'm actually astonished actually just at the quantity of the number of these pieces that come through that are just still brilliant.
And what would you pick out as a new one that you can tell us about to look forward to? Is there one that you're going to
Yes, we do have. Now, this is the moment when the title slips my mind, but we do have a brilliant new Australian one, which is a murder mystery, actually based on documentary fact, which is about a spate of kind of gay hate murders that happened in Australia around Bondi Beach. So that's coming up in the autumn. And there are another few choice ones, which I wanted to announce, but I'm not being allowed to announce. But basically, we've got a very strong autumn schedule.
So the Australian won't have subtitles, presumably?
They're quite big ones.
Okay.
No subtitles.
Sure. Of course, there is the recent government white paper that said that the BBC should cut down on acquisitions and should spend more on homegrown stuff. How does that impact on you? Because, I mean, you're hardly going to suddenly stop doing your Saturday night thing. Sure. It's been such a big hit.
Well, I mean, I think, you can say on the one hand that the BBC should cut down on acquisitions, but the BBC4's service licence agreement says in very large letters in about paragraph 2, what BBC4 is there to do is to bring the best of global television to a UK audience. Right. So it's a little bit hard to do that without acquiring anything.
Okay, yes.
And actually, to be fair, this is a kind of trope that endlessly gets banged on about the BBC, and you actually look at the amount of acquisitions we do, and it is lower by orders of magnitude these days than it was 10 or 20 years ago. So I think it's a bit of a white elephant, really.
Sure. One of the other kind of key word in the white paper was distinctiveness. And you yourself have said that BBC4 is profoundly distinctive in the global broadcasting landscape.
I have.
Can you expand a bit more on kind of exactly what makes it unique in the world?
Sure. I just don't think that there is any other channel or any other service in the broadcasting landscape which is got the same conviction, the brief. I mean, this comes from the very top of the BBC. It's about how we conceive of what we're doing. It's create a television series which is actively and happily engaged with rich, complicated ideas and exploring them, and is fearless about that. That is our job, which is, in terms of the portfolio, and one gets asked about it. I mean, BBC Two has a fantastic job. Its job is to broaden people's horizons, to take them out into the world. BBC Four's job is to take them beneath the waves and go deep. I don't think there is, in fact, I know there isn't any other channel or any other place that would commission a television series on 19th century German philosophers. and yet it rated really well. So, you know, I think that's brilliant.
But of course, we are in a world where the BBC has to make cuts, you know, make hundreds of millions of cuts. So, you know, I worry, you know, BBC Three was removed from our TV sets, if you like. I do, you know, and there's always rumours about BBC Four. Can you tell us that there's no threat to it being cut, and that you're going to be able to carry on making this unique, distinctive, keeping this unique, distinctive channel, despite £800 million worth of cuts?
You can never say never, but, you know, I don't think the Director General could never say never about anything that might happen within the BBC. You know, what I do know is that there's a conviction from Tony Hall through Charlotte and all the way down that BBC Four is an absolutely essential and important part of what our television offer is and what that portfolio offer is. I think that, you know, yes, you know, we've had a goodish charter settlement, but there are some big questions further down the line. The counterpoint that I would say, and this isn't, you know, and this is not me arguing to my bosses because they already know this, is that it's a brilliantly successful channel and it's also a brilliantly cost-effective channel. You know, what we're able to do with the money that we have a reach of 16 million a week. What we're able to do with the money and the cash that we have, I think, you know, is disproportionately successful. And that's not because we're doing something singular. It's about how effectively and well we fit with what the BBC does overall. We could only do that because of everything else that's going on around the organisation. But it is one of those kind of, you know, prizes and premiums that the BBC is able to bring with the licence fee to the audience that, because of the way we're structured and because of the way we're funded, we can do.
We're going to look at a show in a sec that is in a section we're calling The Show I Stood By, which is a show that may not have worked in terms of ratings.
Sure.
But is ratings an issue for you then? So if you know, because you're dealing with niche subjects, and but you say, you know, ratings are up. But if they went down, is that a problem? And do you stop worrying about?
I mean, no, it's not. I mean, I think there's in fact, oddly, I kind of often, you know, I'm often told, look, really don't worry about the ratings. There's still a kind of matter of personal pride to me, which is I really like, you know, we are a television channel. We do need to talk to an audience of some scale. So that's important. But no, I don't have a reach or share target to go up or to stay constant or to do whichever. That's not what the channel's about. What's much more important for BBC Four is those AI, how much the audience love those programmes, the fresh and new, how distinctive they are. So those are the scores that I really concentrate on.
Let's have a look at the show you stood by, which is the UK's best part-time band.
Indeed.
You can probably tell these hoodlums' lives have gone seriously off the tracks.
Morning, Clive.
Oh, hang on, they're doctors.
Waterworks all right? Yeah, that's what I like to hear.
But once a week, they're thrashing out their stress in a sweaty noise spittoon with bassist, sound engineer Rob, and Adam, Yorkshire's premier naked drum teacher.
So there's anger in our music because we are angry at the minute. Our whole profession's angry and we're all demoralised and currently being bleeped.
No, that's a funny clip. It was a fun show. Why didn't it particularly work?
I know. You tell me. I don't know. So for those that don't know, it was as the title said, it was BBC Four's take on kind of Pop Idol, etc. Which is that what we wanted to do was we wanted to do a talent show, but we wanted to do a talent show where there was absolutely no prize whatsoever. And what it was about passion and about passion for music. And Wall to Wall did it, and they did an absolutely beautiful job of it. We had kind of, you know, thousands of bands applying. Rod Gilbert, you know, had a mentor with him with each episode, went round the country, found these extraordinary bands, people who've been playing music for the sheer pleasure of it for 20, 30 years together. And as I say, I just think it was a wonderful and lovely piece of television. It didn't rate very well. Why didn't it rate well? Well, I think it's a slight problem, which is one of those challenges with any channel or service or whatever, which is you can be surprising, but you can't be too surprising. And that I think that in the end, the audience, the BBC Four audience, just didn't quite expect or anticipate something like that. Right. And there's a kind of element which actually, oh gosh, maybe it might have been better on BBC Two, but actually it probably wouldn't have been better on BBC Two because it was about passion and about that really deep level passion. So that's a very BBC Four thing. So in the end, a lesson learned, but a lesson learned through, I think, what was a beautifully made piece of television. And also, I just think that Rod was just fantastic through it. And if anyone needs someone to write witty commentary, phone up Rod Gilbert. He's fantastic.
But does that mean you're never going to do a talent show ever again?
No, actually, I've got another one coming up, starting next week, which is Britain's Best Amateur Orchestra.
Okay.
Which will be interesting to see what happens, because it may fit a bit more into what the BBC4 demographic is or isn't.
Yeah.
But, you know, to a certain extent, I don't mind. It goes back to that question of, do ratings matter? No. My brief is to push the boundary, to experiment, to innovate, to see what I can do. So the amateur orchestra thing, I'm not sure how well it will do, but it's been a fantastic thing of engaging with amateur classical musicians up and down the country. And again, brilliant.
Yeah. Let's take another question from the video wall.
If you could steal any programme off any channel, UK or internationally, what would it be?
Made in Chelsea, Monte Carlo. No, that's a lie. I don't know that I'd want to steal a particular piece. I don't know. I think there are levels of kind of things like some acquisitions that I would, if I had limitless funds, I would go for. I would have loved for BBC4 to have the new Twin Peaks. You know, I think that would have worked really well for us. I think that would have been absolutely in the demographic. I think there are some, you know, we do brilliantly with the Scandinavian drama, but it's a bit of a cliche, but I think it's true that television is doing so. It is having a bit of an extraordinary golden age, and I think there are also some comedies, those really kind of big brainy comedies of the US, that I'd love to have the funds to be able to take, but we can't.
I know the average age of the BBC viewer is kind of like 60-ish, is that right?
Yeah.
And so is that a worry that they're a bit on the old side and they may be getting older, or do you need to try and think about attracting younger viewers? Is that even an issue for you?
Well, the interesting thing about it is that, so the BBC4's average age is 59, which you go, oh my God, that's terribly old. There's a couple of things, though, to think about in that one, which is, the interesting thing to me, again, not to do down my illustrious colleagues, is that BBC One and BBC Two is getting older and older and older, and getting to that. BBC4 is staying constantly at 59. So actually, when people go, you know, there's that great, everyone's terrified that actually all we're doing is going with an audience that is just getting older and older and older, and then they'll all die and we won't have an audience. I don't think that's true. I think what's happening is clearly the BBC4's audience is renewing itself. But we were talking about it just before this, which is that, yes, television has an old demographic. You know, yes, it's true that, the young folks are consuming stuff on YouTube and on their mobile phones and all the rest of it. But the idea, as in kind of Shane's kind of, you know, McTaggart lecture, that we're at some kind of apocalyptic binary moment where the baby boomers are going to get overtaken by Generation Y and everything's going to change, I think it's bollocks, because I think the truth of it is that when you're younger, you tend not to watch much TV because you're going out and you're having fun and enjoying yourself. Interesting, you tend to be more engaged in quite, you know, knotty social issues, and absolutely rightly too. You know, I can remember myself in my 20s and 30s, and I was not only engaged in them, but running around the world making hardcore current affairs documentaries. But the truth of it is that as you get older, and we were talking about it, lots of your readership in Heat, they don't have TVs from 15 to 25. By the time they're 30, they bought a TV. And then by the time that they got married, settled down and had kids, and have had to try to get the kids to bed and all the rest of it, by the time they're watching a shed load more TV. So television, communal television watching at home is fundamentally a family/older experience as it stands.
I like the idea that you were making Vice-style TV shows in your 20s and 30s.
I certainly was. You check them out. Beneath the Veil, hardcore, that
one. Let's talk about another the genre, the kind of big genre we haven't tackled yet, which is science.
Yes.
Big science. Now, of course, we see BBC Two has great science stuff. BBC One now as well has its own kind of very popular science. So is science still key for you, and in what way are you going to carry on dealing with it?
Completely. No, science really important, and people who know me know that I love science television. It's one of my great passions. I think, you know, I think what's brilliant actually about the science story across the BBC as a whole is that it works really effectively. You know, I mean, what BBC One is about its real kind of popular science in the real world, with a bit of mega-scale wonder with Brian Cox. BBC Two very much is world of kind of current affairs science with Horizon, and kind of the event pieces of stargazing and other elements like that. And then what BBC4 science is about taking your brain and taking a NutriBullet and putting your brain in the NutriBullet and scrambling your mind. What I love about science on BBC4 is that there is no limits to how extraordinarily mind-bending we can get, and the audience will come with us. So, you know, great BBC 4 series have been on thermodynamics and the heat death of the universe. You know, we've done detailed series on the evolution of small creatures and birds on Pacific Islands. We've done Michael Mosley analysing his guts and his blood in extraordinary detail, all of which the audience love and the audience come to. And I'm always in the market for, what's the next way, and how can we approach the furthest frontiers of, you know, that wondrous science, and also what are the event pieces? How can we? It's what I call science in a box, but I think we've run out of things to put in a box. But precinct-based science. So a fabulous show that we had this year was Oak Tree, which is a brilliant film made by Paul Sen and his team, where we just examined the life of an oak tree over the course of a year. But the extraordinary thing is that in a single oak tree is one of the most diverse, amazing, rich ecosystems that you could imagine. And that's absolutely kind of classic BBC 4. Take something iconic and simple and then reveal to you that actually you have no idea of the complexity and the wonder that underpins it. So that's
beautiful. But to get down to the nitty-gritty, what kind of tariffs can your science producers and production companies work with?
I think classic kind of BBC 4 tariffs as much as anything else. I mean, you know, we are not as well endowed in terms of actual cost per hour, but, you know, the kind of core tariff for the channel remains around 100 to 120 an hour. And if it's a really good idea, I tend to be able to find some more money. You know, I have a sofa, it has a back, and I can be tempted to put my hand down it if
Can't believe
necessary.
you're allowed a sofa on BBC budget.
No, I am allowed, well, I don't know, Emma, is it fully a sofa? It might be just a slightly saggy easy chair, but nonetheless, it has a back, and it has things in there.
Excellent. So why have you picked, what particularly you're looking forward to about those, or do you pick out one or two things that...
I mean, I think I've mentioned a couple of them before, but I think, you know, the Roots Reggae in Rebellion, that's a brilliant example of us turning the dial on our music coverage with a new voice and a new perspective. So it's a Carlo going back to, you know, he comes from a kind of second generation of that world of roots and reggae and all the rest of it, going back to its roots to discover, you know, what it means to him as much as the genre of roots itself. First Night of Television, I think just a wonderful piece of event TV, and again a little bit of messing around with form in terms of what we do. Amazing thing, just as an aside, so the First Night of Television, the weird thing is it was a bit like the Betamax versus VHS video wars. There were two formats competing with each other. So there was John Logie Baird, who we all think is, you know, the inventor of television, and then there was Thorny MI. But what tends to be forgotten about this one is that John Logie Baird's system of television was absolutely dreadful and involved a giant spinning wheel, and the only way that you could be filmed was to lock yourself in a completely pitch dark box and then talk to a small hole in the wall. And so for some reason, we do recreate this, and Paul Dallas Campbell actually has to do it, and you had to wear green face makeup so that the camera could see you. So we can all understand why John Logie Baird didn't quite reach the heights of success that he might have wanted to. Anyway, it's a lovely piece of television, chock full of detail. I think that you know, other pieces through the autumn. Well, there's the wonderful Vic Reeves Dada film, Gaga for Dada, which is again, you know, really great part of the BBC 4 story is that every year what we like to do is we like to take a genre of art and absolutely drill into it and unpack all its details. So we've done abstract and we've done pop art. So this year we're going to do conceptual art. And
isn't it true you've got a Peter York project coming up? And is it true he's there? In fact, there in the front. That he this time last year, he said, "Why don't you put me on a channel?" And you backed it. That's how we got commissioned.
That's not quite how it happened, but nonetheless. Peter's been very faithfully coming to these excellent. But I don't think it's quite as simple as that. It's actually that I think that for all of, you know, Peter being here and all the rest of it, I do think that Peter is an absolutely brilliant person and just the right kind of person to be on BBC 4. He's a man of extraordinary expertise, but of brilliant opinions and real passion. And I think that's absolutely what BBC 4 is about. And his film is brilliant, by the way.
So apart from literally now people saying to you, please commission me, what is the best way to approach you, to communicate with you and ask and try and get shows commissioned on your channel?
Kind of two paths, as it were, which is and I think there might be an incredibly boring slide that we could put up, which is an organogram.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Did we all look at that? That's amazing. Apart from the fact that all of my colleagues look like they should be arrested or just have been. So there are two bits of it, which is one, there's me, obviously, which is that if you've got an idea or whatever, you can always send me an email, but make it very short, and I will endeavour to reply. But there is obviously the formal commissioning structure, and they get very cross if they don't get involved in these things, and quite rightly too. So basically, the core of BBC4 is factual television and the factual genres. There's all been, as the BBC always likes to do, we've had a little bit of reorganisation, but not that much around the commissioning side of factual. Alison's now in charge, absolutely brilliant. And then the four key genres for BBC4 are arts, which is Mark, Jan for music, Claire for documentaries, and Tom for basically history and science and natural history. All of them are brilliant, all of them are fabulous colleagues, all of them know exactly what it is that makes a BBC4 show. So just email them as well. And also, I think I'm obliged to say, although I've worked on the other side of it, and I know you guys work on the other side of it, it's not brilliant, but it is important. There is that BBC pitch system, so do make sure that you also log things in on that, because it is important. Right. That's the way to do it. But as I say, my email box is always open, and I do endeavour to read everything, and I do endeavour to come back to people. And probably what will happen is that if it's an interesting idea, what I will do is send you off to these guys to go and work it up, basically.
Sure. That is a great organogram.
It's a fabulous organogram, isn't that amazing?
Absolutely.
The simplest one the BBC could produce.
Totally. Now we will come to you guys in a sec if you want to ask any questions live. We have roving mics, but we've got some great ones here. This is the first one. Is BBC4's identity harmed by having to show current music festival highlights due to BBC Three's move online?
No, I don't think so at all. No, I mean, music has, actually, strangely, music, actually they probably fit better on BBC4. Music has always been a core part of the BBC4 story. As I say, Friday night has always been a great, a music destination for audiences. And I'm really pleased and feel really proud that we were able to show such brilliant performances.
What about the Olympics? The Olympics was interesting, wasn't it? Because you had to show it on BBC. It probably would have been on BBC Three if it still existed. Yep. And maybe BBC4's core audience isn't that kind of sporty kind of. It doesn't feel like sporty. But was that a problem for you? And did you manage to show it in a BBC4 type way?
Well, the Olympics. I mean, there were various mutterings. In fact, there were quite a lot of mutterings that would come in on the log. But the truth of it is that the Olympics is an extraordinary international global event, and that. I think absolutely rightly the BBC gets behind the Olympics and wants to show it in all of its detail and all of its depth as much as it can. Now, we don't have BBC Three anymore, but the idea that we wouldn't turn over our linear channels to the extent that we need to turn them over to do justice to the Olympics, I think would be is ridiculous. I think that also, I'm absolutely glad to come on side with it. I mean, the numbers were extraordinary overall. I can't say I was incredibly disappointed to beat ITV1 on 3 separate occasions. But fundamentally, the point with the Olympics and what it does is it shows, again, in this environment where these forums just love to kind of, lament the death of television and all the rest of it. By God, did the Olympics show the value of linear television? And I'm glad to be proud to support that.
It's a question about The Detectorist, which was a brilliant award-winning comedy. A, will there be more? And B, are you looking for more comedy?
So Detectorist, I very much hope so. Definitely, Shane, I, and actually the Detectorist team are all looking forward. We'd really like to do more. It's about finding the right time and all the people's schedules and all the rest of it, but I agree, it's a fabulous piece. And yes, we are, comedy does remain an important part of the BBC4 story. We had a brilliant Joe Brand series earlier this year. Got a new one coming up. Comedy is good.
What's the single biggest thing BBC4 is missing at the moment?
The single biggest.
Tough one.
Don't know. 10 million quid.
What have you learned? We've kind of covered this a bit. What have you learned from shows that didn't work? Anything apart from that one?
That thing, but it's that interesting thing of the part-time band, which is. We're an ambitious channel. We're a clever channel. We like to mess with things. It's a tightrope that we walk, and that we can push the audience, but sometimes you have to lead them as well.
Sure. Let's start taking questions to the audience as well, because I'm sure there might be some. And then there's a lady there. There'll be a mic. Just hold one sec. Sorry, I didn't give the mic man warning that I was doing this. Any second now. There you go.
Hi, Cassian. You're obviously turning into the Shane Smith of the baby boomer generation, being very disruptive.
I think Shane Smith is secretly a baby boomer as well, but anyway.
So I wonder if there's enough space on BBC, which relies heavily on experts, to start having people who are passionate about something presenting the information rather than people who necessarily have a degree, for example, in the history and science arena specifically?
Yeah, I think passion brings you expertise. I don't think, no, I mean, you know, a BBC 4 presenter doesn't need to turn up with a kind of Oxbridge first-class degree at all. They just need to be really passionate and knowledgeable out of their subject. Peter, you know, is, you know, one of Britain's foremost social commentators. I don't think he's got a degree in it or anything like that. He's just brilliant and passionate about that particular subject. So no, passion over pieces of paper, certainly, in terms of qualification, I think absolutely the case.
Great, I'll send you an idea.
I do.
Gentleman up there.
Cassian, have you been given a cast iron guarantee by Tony that BBC 4 won't close as part of the £800 million cuts programme, or are you still dangling slightly?
Oh God, all these questions about whether BBC 4 sustains or not. No, I don't have something written in blood at all, because, as I say, I don't think that any organisation can ever guarantee anything. But, as I say, there is a conviction from the whole organisation that BBC 4 is an incredibly important part of what we do. And I don't think I can say more than that, really. I mean, you know, there are elements in terms of how any organisation works that are beyond that organisation's control. So, you know, nobody can cast iron guarantee anything.
It's a very specific question I do want to ask. I have clients that tick the diversity box and those that tick the disability box. Do I bring them in to meet you, a commissioning editor or an indie?
Commissioning editor, really. I think that's the thing to do, but drop me a line as well.
And how do you think your white, middle-class, middle-aged audience will respond to 2 films on hip-hop is one of my favourite
That's a really good question. I don't care. They're going to have to watch them. That's what I say. I think they'll respond really well. But on the other hand, I think it's really interesting for us to reach out to an audience which isn't white and male and middle class and does, you know, and is, you know, is of a different demographic. I think there's a genuine, you know. I talked with Bob Shannon, who's the head of BBC Music. You know, with Ben Cooper, head of Radio 1, with, you know, Paul, head of Radio 6, and we're all really interested across radio and TV about how we shift and move audiences, you know, because that question of demographics and audiences' age is actually an even more pressing question for radio, about how we help the BBC's music story to be more holistic and to talk to the broadest possible audience.
So on that point, this question is funny. Do you ever worry that every single subgenre of pop music has now been covered and there's nowhere left to go?
No, because I think the thing to do is to not think of, although obviously we're doing films on hip-hop or whatever, is that there are many more ways to skin the music story cat than to do it by genre, which is kind of what People's History of Pop was about. Or we did a brilliant series on Music Moguls, which was about the business of music. So if we were merely in the process of just ticking off a list of subgenre, yes, we'd have a problem, but that's not what music is about. It's about something much more important. It's about passion, and it's about memory, and it's about nostalgia, and it's about emotion, and there are many ways to tell that story.
Any more questions from the audience? We've just got a few minutes left. No? Fine. Oh, yes.
No, thank you.
I was just wondering where you felt new talent and opportunities for new talent sat within the BBC4 remit, given that the stakes are so high for drama, documentary, comedy on the other channels.
I think that we are a place where new talent can come forward. I'm really open to that and to bringing new people onto the talent, new people onto the channel. I think the only thing that I would say with that is that the distinction is that for BBC4, I think when we, and quite rightly and quite logically, what new talent tends to be is it tends to be quite young people starting out on a career and wanting to be a presenter or whichever. And that works for the other channels, for BBC 1 and 2, because they have opportunities and places where the classic presenter has an obvious place. BBC 4 we don't have presenters, we have experts in subjects, so new experts, absolutely. But one of the ways to think about it is, there's a few people that I brought to the BBC, but Mary Beard was one of them. Now, Mary Beard had never made a television programme until the age of 58, and had been very happily being a classics presenter and becoming absolutely a classics professor, being, absolutely devoted to that and doing a brilliant job of that. And actually, it was Lion Television as much as anything else, who found her and kind of brought her forward as somebody to be a TV presenter. And now she's become one of the nation's most loved history presenters. But that's born out of not her kind of, being somebody who said, oh, I want to be on TV. It's about her becoming absolutely expert and extraordinary, and also in consequence relaxed with the subject area, which allows her to talk about it in a way which is incredibly engaging. And I think that's the way that I look at talent. It's that kind of mode. All power to all of those people, particularly in the diverse community, who want to get on television and want to be presenters and all the rest of it. That's not quite, though, right for BBC 4.
We have pretty much run out of time, but finally, this is a good question on the app. Do you have the best job on TV?
I like to think so. I mean, it's a fabulous train set. It's really enjoyable. As as I hope I said, I have great support from the rest of the BBC about what I do. I think we've produced and continue to produce some fabulous television as well. So I do hugely enjoy it, but that's not down to me. That's down to the people that I work with on the channel team. It's down to the people who make the programmes, all those brilliant indies and in-house suppliers, and that's what makes it fabulous.
Great, thank you. Brilliant. Well, just leaves me to say thanks to Cassian, thanks to Broadcast, sponsors, and thanks to you for great questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.